Today marks week 5 of the XFL season. We are officially over the hump, halfway through a season that's been decent at best. Inconsistent is probably the best word to describe the XFL right now, with some good play, some bad play, some players that are excellent that should be in the NFL next year, with some really bad players that shouldn't be in the XFL next year. There are some great looking teams, while other teams look like bad college teams. Nonetheless, we've had weeks and weeks of some exciting daily fantasy football, and that's why you're here. In this video, we're talking all things daily fantasy football for week 5 of the XFL. We'll talk a bit of strategy, what to look for in week 5, and of course, which players stand out as the best DFS plays for week 5 of the XFL season. So if that's what you're looking for, you've come to the right place. Sit back, relax, and let's talk some week 5 XFL. Hey guys, welcome back to No Huddle Fantasy Sports and the Week 5 DFS Picks video here on YouTube. Of course, as always, thank you for finding this channel. Thank you for clicking on this video. You're here, of course, because you like the XFL. You're watching XFL. You're playing some daily fantasy football. If you're not, well, I guess thank you for getting lost and finding and clicking on this video. But regardless why you're here, this video is going to be a little bit faster than usual. There's a lot going on today. We got to get this video out. It is Saturday morning, about 9:45 in the morning on the East Coast, so we only have a few hours till the 2 p.m. kickoff for the Saturday main slate here. So we're not going to waste any time here. We're going to just push forward into the video here, into our picks, into our strategy. We're going to take a quick back look into week 4, pull out some stats, see what we can use. But as always, take a look at the games for this weekend, Saturday, 3/7/2020. That is today at 2 p.m. We have the undefeated Houston Roughnecks hosting the Seattle Dragons. At 5 p.m. we have the coming off of a win New York Guardians visiting Dallas Renegades, who unfortunately lost to the Houston Roughnecks last weekend on Sunday, 3/8/2020. At 3 p.m. we have St. Louis, my opinion, the best team in the league right now, visiting the DC Defenders, who just have looked really bad on offense over the last couple of weeks. And then at 9 p.m. a late cap game, one of the latest games I think of the season. We have the Vipers of Tampa Bay visiting the LA Wildcats to cap off the main slate, 4-game overall slate on DraftKings, 2-game slate on FanDuel. I've had a little bit of content here. I really have broken down numbers for this past week. We're starting to see some trends fly out, some different things that we can, I wouldn't say rely on, but that we can utilize for DFS. Look, here's the deal. It's a shortened season. There's only 8 total weeks of this season. In an entire season, the stats still are not that reliable. Nonetheless, we can pull some things here. I've attempted to break it down, so we'll quickly go over it. Your week 4 leaders at the running back position in terms of rushing attempts and targets. So this is really opportunities for running backs to succeed. You have Smith, Patrick, Artis Payne, Victor, and Matt Jones rounding out the top 5. You can see here I do really like Smith this week. We'll talk about him for Tampa Bay. He had 27 in week 4. Compare that to his 2020 average of 19.25 total opportunities, so it's gone up a little bit. To add to that, we also had Patrick for Tampa Bay also get 21 attempts in week 4, opportunities in week 4, I should say, much higher than his average of 15. So a two-headed monster attack there for Tampa Bay, nonetheless both getting opportunities. As I mentioned, Artis Payne for Dallas, 20 in week 4. Victor for New York, they actually had the lead for the first time. He had 19 compared to 15 as his season average. And then Matt Jones, a little bit down last week, only had 16 opportunities compared to his 17.5 for the season. I also wanted to make note of running back elusive ratings. It's a great stat to utilize in fantasy football in general, but also for daily fantasy football. So last week, you can see I have them ranked here. Patrick, Farrow, Dunbar, Smith, and Pumphrey for the DC Defenders are the top 5 for week 4. Patrick for Tampa Bay looking really good at 181.4. That's 60 points higher than his 2020 average. Farrow for Seattle, 180 in week 4 as an elusive rating. Much higher, 100 points higher than his 2020 average. So you can see here, these stats, as I mentioned, you're talking 4 weeks of data, so they can drastically change over a given week. So look at them, but don't completely just rely on them. Then I mentioned Dunbar at 112, Smith at 73, Pumphrey at 65. All these guys are up, except for Smith. He was a bit bit down compared to his 3-week average prior to that. Probably the most important position here, the wide receiver position. I want to talk about targets in week 4. Your leader was Trey McBride at 12 for the Los Angeles Wildcats. Season average, he's only played a couple of games, was 9, so that's up for him. D. Williams for Tampa Bay had 11 compared to 7.75 for the 2020 average. Again, up for him. Pretty much all of these receivers you can see here are trending upwards. Lewis for Houston. Cam Phillips had a bad game for Houston, and it all went to Lewis here at 10 total targets for week 4. Eli Rogers for DC at 8, and then Jordan Smallwood for LA. Again, another LA player with 7 here, up from his average of 5.25, taking advantage of that Nelson Spruce injury. And finally here, I talked last week about yards per route run. It's a great statistics. It's better than your typical yards per reception or yards per target, which typically people rely on. Yards per route run, in my opinion, is a better statistic. It's more drilled down. And so what are we looking at here? Well, Pearson L for St. Louis, 4.73 in week 4, almost doubling his 2020 average. Trey McBride, he only played 2 weeks here. It was his second week he played. It was averaging 4.5 after just 1 game. So that went down obviously a little bit here, but still excellent at 3.05. Jordan Smallwood, another player for LA. I mentioned benefiting from that Spruce injury, 2.68. D. Williams for Tampa Bay, 2.32. And then Nagel for Dallas, surprisingly at 1.69, making the top 5 list here for an underneath slot receiver guy. Pretty impressive, a little bit up from his 2020 average. So take those stats as I mentioned as you see them. Don't consider them or weigh them in too heavily, considering we only have 4 weeks. But we're starting to see some data here. We can start to pan it out, look at it a little bit, and see what we consider. So what's our outlook for week 5? Well, the one thing I do want to mention, unfortunately, DFS sites are starting to shrink their XFL offerings, clearly becoming a niche thing. I will give you an example for DraftKings. Their main big tournament has shrunk down in terms of, I think first place gets $25,000. So that's much lower than it's been for the first 4 weeks of the season. Something to consider here. Keep playing, keep watching these games. It's the only way it's going to survive is through us as fans, us as players, us as guys that are going to get, or gals that are going to get involved in DFS. I also want to make mention Houston's offense this week, just like last week, Vegas has them totaled at 29 overall points. That's a full touchdown higher than the second highest team, I believe, is LA or Dallas. Regardless, they're a full TD higher than those. Nelson Spruce remains out. I talked about him a little bit already, and they waived Whitfield. So you're looking at some extreme value receivers in LA, something you can take advantage of here, in addition to main players like Trey McBride. It is a very, very ugly week for the quarterback position. I mean, let's talk about it. It's the XFL. It's typically ugly for the quarterback position, but it's really, really ugly in week 5. You have a lot of backups playing, and you have a number of committees. Dallas has a backup. New York, Tampa Bay, and Seattle. 4 total teams here, or 3 teams, I should say, with possible committee approaches to the quarterback position. So that's half the league. 50% of the league has either a backup in or they're going to employ a committee approach. I do want to make mention, it's been consistent if you just stick to the teams with the highest Vegas and game totals. That's Houston this week, that's Dallas, that's LA. Stick to those teams because that's where Vegas is trending, and that's a way you consistently rely on one statistic that's going to give you at least an opportunity to score some points with players in high total games. This week for strategy, we're going to pay up a QB. Typically do that every single week. We're going to look at middle tier wide receivers and try to squeeze in a middle tier running back, which is unusual for us. Nonetheless, that's our strategy for the week. And as always, make sure you watch these games, participate in these games, get involved in social media, Twitter, everything else. Make sure you're playing DFS. If you're watching this video and you're not going to play DFS, well, God bless you. You might be lost, and I thank you for hanging in here for 8 or 9 minutes. But hey, watch these games. It's a good football. It's exciting football. And if we get involved, this thing's going to continue to grow, continue to give us better DFS offerings. So let's jump into the quarterback position. I'm looking at Philip Walker. I'm paying way up this week. $12,000 on DraftKings, $23 on FanDuel. Very, very expensive playing at home versus Seattle. Houston is a 12.5 point favorite. I do love Philip Walker this week. I'm sure everybody loves Philip Walker. You should have played him almost every single week regardless. But week 4, 239 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. That was arguably a floor game for him. That's probably probably his lowest output, 21 points. It's expensive salary, but you know what you're getting with him. He's consistent. He's the highest Vegas team total this week at 29. He has a ridiculous amount of deep ball attempts, which is what you want out of a quarterback. A guy that's attacking downfield, and he's the one doing that right now. He leads the XFL in deep ball attempts for the season. He's also giving you 4 or 5 rushing attempts a game, 20, 30 yards rushing. So that's extra 2 or 3 points. You can't pass that up. And to talk about Seattle's defense right now, if you look at the first 4 weeks, their coverage defense is awful. They're ranked 7 out of 8 total teams, bottom of the barrel there, whereas their rush defense is ranked first. So they're not going to be able to run the ball, hopefully. Not going to be able to run the ball against Seattle. They don't have much of a rushing game anyway. They're going to have to throw the ball. That's what they excel at. I do love Philip Walker, even at the expensive price tag. We'll show you some players later to help you fit him. If I'm not playing Philip Walker, and trust me, I'm mostly playing Philip Walker, I'm going to pay down, and go with BJ Daniels here at $7,200 on DraftKings, $17 on FanDuel. He's on the other side of the ball here, playing at Houston. They're huge underdogs at 12.5. Week 4, he had 100 passing yards and a touchdown in a relief appearance. He only played one half of football and had those statistics. This is completely a salary play, a value play. There's a lot of risk here because he could split time with Silvers. He shouldn't, but he might. They talked about them splitting time. Hopefully he does in here. But he had a solid relief appearance last week, week 4, providing a spark for that offense. He has rushing upside. He had 7 rushing attempts, 84 rushing yards in only one half of football played. So could we get 10 to 15 rushing attempts out of this guy? Possibly. If he starts and plays an entire game, if he's the starter for them, keep an eye on that. If there's anything to indicate otherwise, you might want to fade off of him. But if he's going to start this game, he's an excellent play at $7,200, getting you some much needed ground game. On top of that, he's the dual threat quarterback. He's going to throw the ball a little bit, not the best passer in the world, but he's going to give you that upside with his legs. Moving on to the running back position here. This is where I'm going to pay a little bit money compared to what I have done in the past. We're starting to see some things flush out here, and Davion Smith for Tampa Bay is certainly getting a good, consistent workload, which I like. $7,900 on DraftKings, $15 on FanDuel, playing on the road in LA. It's the last game of the entire slate. They're underdogs here at 2.5 points. I'm not really worried about that. If you go back to last week, he had 24 attempts for 122 rushing yards, 2 receptions, and 11 reception yards. Played 65% of the snaps last week. They're committed to the run. That's Tampa Bay. Regardless of the score, regardless of the game flow, they're going to give their running backs the ball. They realize that's where they excel. They have a good offensive line. They have 2 of the best offensive linemen, run offensive linemen in the game. So they're going to continue to favor that style of offense. He's grading out as the single most elusive back in the XFL. I'm talking season total, not just week 4, but the entire season. He's looking good. He looks like he's going to be an NFL running back last year. More on that though. LA, Los Angeles Wildcats, they're the worst XFL team right now at stopping the run. It plays right into Tampa Bay's strength. You can pivot to Patrick if Smith is too pricey, because Patrick's going to get a workload too. He's going to get a solid workload for a little bit cheaper, but Patrick's price is up. I do like Davion Smith. His price $7,900 on DraftKings. Stick with him if you want a consistent back playing in a good situation against a bad run defense. Seems like the trend here is to play both sides of the ball in the same game for the position, and that's what I'm doing here again. M. Carter and D. Harris for LA. I don't know the situation, how it's going to roll out, but you have to watch this. So $4,600 for Carter, $3,600 for Harris. This is where we're saving money. $12 on FanDuel. Playing at home versus the Tampa Bay Vipers. Like I mentioned, on the other side of the ball, they are a slight favorite here at 2.5 points. I have some stats listed here. It's only for Harris, so ignore that. But really the situation here is these are super value guys that are going to get an opportunity. It seems like Hood is losing a grip on the starting gig in LA. Both running backs offer great value. Harris logged 78% of the snaps in week 4 without Carter. So Carter is a bit banged up. I think he's expected to play. If Carter's going to play, if he's healthy, play him. Otherwise, pivot to Harris. Harris should get 70, 80% of the snaps again, which would be great. Basically these guys are the only Los Angeles backs to do anything productive between weeks 3 and 4. I'm not playing Hood. I'm playing these guys. You don't need a ton out of them. If you get 5 to 10 carries, squeeze a score out of one of them, boom, you've hit value. You've actually probably blown through value for the running back position. Wide receivers, I'm sticking with an LA guy here, Trey McBride. Had an excellent week last week. His price is elevated. $11,700 on DraftKings, $20 on FanDuel. Playing at home versus LA. LA minus 2.5 point favorite. The stats here are wrong, and I apologize for that. He had 12 total targets, 8 receptions, 127 receiving yards, and had a score through the air. The big thing here is Spruce remains injured. He remains out for LA. So that's going to contribute to Trey McBride just as it did last week. Played 97% of the snaps in week 4, led all XFL receivers, we showed it earlier, with 12 total targets. He had a 30% target share in week 4. Compare that to 24% in week 3. So clearly getting a boost with Spruce being out. Big upside, fast downfield threat, a guy that's going to blow the top off a defense and get you those big long distance scores. Realize he has only played 2 games, but he is the XFL leader in that yards per route run statistics at 4.05. And Tampa Bay in general, they're nothing to be scared of. Middle of the pack versus pass, middle of the pack in terms of secondary coverage. Moving on from him, and I believe this is out of order in terms of I typically put my most cheapest value guys at the end, but I couldn't pass this up. I do love Sam Mobley this week for Houston, and this is how you get Philip Walker in a mid-tier running back. He's $3,800 on draft, $12 on FanDuel, playing at home versus Seattle. Houston is a 12.5 point favorite, not 7-point favorite. Nothing really to talk about in terms of stats. This is the deal with him. He's been primarily splitting snaps 50-50 with Sammy Coates. Coates has been ruled out this week, so you're looking at him possibly playing 75% in terms of Mobley of the snaps this week. More field time, more opportunity. Value salary pays off without a crazy stat line. If we can get 5 to 10 targets, 10 targets would be amazing. 5 targets out of this guy, possibly a little bit more yardage, a score, you're going to crush in terms of value here, and he helps you fit other players. I don't think it's a stretch here. With Sammy Coates being out, he's going to have increased role, increased opportunity. You have to like that. The offense he's playing in, 29 points, total Vegas points. You want to get exposure to this offense. Seattle is strong versus the run. I already talked about it for Walker. They're weak versus the pass. So take advantage of the savings here. Go with Mobley. The other 2 receivers, Flynn Nagel for Dallas. Price isn't great. $7,400 for a guy that's getting 5 targets a game isn't the most attractive thing in the world. He's $16 on FanDuel, playing at home versus New York. Dallas is a 7-point favorite. Last week, six targets, as I mentioned, 6 receptions, 76 receiving yards. Extremely consistent. You know you're going to get about 6 targets. He's extremely efficient. You're going to get 5 or 6 catches off those targets. So it's all good things in terms of what you know you're going to get and his consistency and the efficiency of those targets. But the thing here is Nelson is playing quarterback for Dallas this week. Philip Nelson is replacing Landry Jones due to injury, and we can look back to week 1 when Nelson did start. He led Dallas in targets. That's Flynn Nagel did. So all basically that Philip Nelson does is throw underneath short routes. They're still going to throw the ball 40 times, and they're going to look underneath. They're going to check it down. They're going to throw those little passes to Flynn Nagel. New York does struggle for slot receivers, so that does benefit him a little bit here. I just like the play. I think you're going to consistently get the same thing out of him, if not more this week, because of the way in which Nelson does not throw the ball downfield. Finally here, we're going to load up on Houston receivers, Houston running back / receivers, Nick Hawley. Everyone's loved him this year. He's played really, really well. $7,100 on DraftKings, and $17 on FanDuel, playing at home versus Seattle. 12.5 point favorite. All the stuff you've heard already. Last week was a great week for him. He had 10 targets, 8 receptions, 97 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Load up here on Houston receivers. That's basically the moral of the story. You don't have to pay up for Cam Phillips. You can come down and you can get other players like Nick Hawley, whose price is elevated, but still a great play. Coming off a season best game. The thing to look at here is his snaps have increased week to week. 100% of the snaps in week 4. You don't really see that out of a lot of receivers. Every single week his snaps have gone up. Not surprisingly, so have his stats. 98% of the time he plays the slot receiver role. He's not really playing running back anymore. He's playing in that elite XFL offense, the highest Vegas total in terms of team at 29, highest overall game total. You want exposure to that game. I do like Nick Hawley. Seattle struggles in pass coverage, and they really, really struggle versus slot receivers. So Nick Hawley lining up in an excellent spot this week. Other plays here, I don't want to spend too much time on this slide, but if you don't want to play Daniel as a quarterback, you could go down. I'm trying to, pay up, pay down. Nelson at QB for Dallas. They're going to throw the ball 40 times. You get a couple scores at his salary. It could be worth it. Artis Payne is a week-to-week great running back. You can play him and not really look back. Christine Michael, running back for St. Louis. I do like him. Cam Phillips, if you can afford to play him, which I certainly can't really do this week with the guys I gave out, you can play him at wide receiver without question. Badette, another receiver for Dallas. Ross is the only receiver I'm really looking at for DC this week. Jordan Smallwood, we saw his stats get elevated with Spruce being out. I do like him for LA. And then lastly here, Tolliver for wide receiver for Tampa Bay. His salary just is not where it needs to be right now, so he is a good price guy. I just don't like the situation with Flowers being back in Tampa Bay necessarily. And so that wraps it up. Thank you guys so much for hanging in there. I know this video is about 20 minutes long, and I keep talking about splitting them up, which I will do eventually. But as always, thank you guys for tuning in. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you smash that subscribe button. It's the easiest way to help grow this channel, help support No Huddle Fantasy Sports, help support myself. When we hit 250 subscribers, I will do some sort of XFL related giveaway. I do appreciate you guys as always. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know who you're looking at this week, what your thoughts on week 5 are. Let me know your thoughts on the XFL. If you think this is going to last, if you think the community is going to grow in terms of DFS, I'd love to hear that. Otherwise, good luck this weekend. I hope to see you atop the leaderboard.